At my daughter's wedding. Her fiancé yanked the chair away just as I was lowering myself into it, sending me tumbling to the ground while the guests erupted in chuckles. Your spot's down there on the floor, he sneered, embarrassing me before the entire crowd. But then the groom's dad rose to his feet, staring at me with wide-eyed astonishment, and murmured, "Sir, could that really be you?" That instant turned everything upside down. Before we go on, please hit subscribe on the channel and drop a comment with the current time and your location. The sharp squeal of brakes pierced the chilly evening air as rubber scraped against pavement. A car door banged closed with a jolt that shook the garage panes. I let go of my wrench, grease spraying over the cement floor as Vivian stormed in through the side entrance. "Dad, you won't believe this." She halted abruptly, hopping from foot to foot like she did at 7 with a secret bubbling up inside her. I cleaned my hands on the grease-soaked cloth, blinking against the stark overhead bulbs. The classic Harley I was restoring lay partially put together. Motor components littered my work table like metallic party favors. Cold winter drafts slipped through the door cracks, blending the aroma of engine lubricant with the sharp January dusk. "What's got you all riled up, honey?" I stood tall, sensing the usual twinge from bending over the motor for so long. Her gaze shone more brilliantly than the engagement band reflecting the garage illumination. The gem was larger than what my mechanic's paycheck could ever cover. She shoved her phone at me, practically shaking with thrill. "Jasper asked me to marry him. Check this out, Dad, watch the clip." I placed the cloth aside and grasped her device gently, my roughened digits smearing the display. The footage depicted a eatery far beyond my budget. Sparkling crystal fixtures, pristine linens, waitstaff in crisp attire. Jasper dropped to one knee by the table, his pricey suit impeccably fitted, a Rolex flashing on his arm as he offered the ring case. He declared, "We're tying the knot in April." Vivian hurried on, her phrases spilling out in a rush. "You'll be thrilled for me, Dad. He's all I've ever wanted." I replayed the clip, observing how Jasper scarcely glanced at the youthful server topping off their drinks. His motion was curt, nearly annoyed by the disruption. In the distance, I heard his voice addressing someone out of frame, the pitch patronizing, though the exact words escaped me. "Naturally, I'm overjoyed for you, darling." I returned the phone, mustering a grin. "When will I meet his folks?" Vivian's anxious giggle bounced off the garage surfaces. "Oh, they're off touring Europe for a couple of months. But they'll return shortly before the ceremony. Jasper insists. We shouldn't delay planning just for them." Vehicles droned from the Brooklyn Road past the garage entrance. Somewhere nearby, locals bid each other good evening, their calls drifting on the frosty breeze. I grabbed another tool, craving an outlet for my fidgety hands. "That's a pretty tight schedule," I remarked, maintaining an even tone. "April isn't far off." "I realize." She twirled in place, arms flung wide as if hugging the universe. "Jasper believes when it's right, it's right. He doesn't favor dragging out engagements." The buzzing lamp above threw stark shadows over the implements strewn on my bench. I peeked at the video again as Vivian clutched the phone, scrutinizing Jasper's expression. Something in his look when he figured eyes weren't on him knotted my gut. "Let me see that ring once more," I suggested, moving nearer. She held out her hand and I examined the stone intently. It was impeccable, costly, the sort of piece designed to dazzle more than convey affection. The design was sleek, chilly somehow, missing the coziness of the plain ring I'd presented to her mom 28 years back. "It's stunning, Vivian." "Truly stunning, right? He has impeccable style." She withdrew her hand, gazing at how the jewel captured the glow. "He plans to treat you to dinner tomorrow evening so you can bond appropriately." I nodded, mentally picturing the suit in my wardrobe, pondering if it would suffice for Jasper's chosen spot. The grease mark on my worktop appeared bolder all of a sudden, more glaring under the intense garage beams. "That sounds good," I replied. Even as discomfort slithered up my back like icy tendrils. "Just us three?" "Yep. His parents aren't due back until close to the wedding. But that's ideal. You'll get his undivided focus." She pecked my cheek, her fragrance mingling with the chill still on her jacket. As she moved to the door linking the garage to the home, she stopped. "Dad, you'll adore him once you truly connect, I swear." The door latched behind her, stranding me with the partially built bike and the resonance of her assurance. I lifted the wrench anew, but my fingers quivered faintly. The footage looped in my thoughts. Jasper's offhand wave, the hasty schedule, the missing parents. I secured the garage and went indoors. Yet the chill in my core wasn't from the January chill. A couple hours on, I perched at the desk in my modest home study, eyeing the monitor that dragged on booting. Maria's picture beamed from its spot by the screen, her bridal gown pure as new-fallen snow, her gaze alight with the same delight I'd spotted in Vivian's tonight. I fingered the gold necklace at my throat, where my wedding band dangled concealed under my shirt. The metal warmed by my skin, an enduring token of vows honored. "I need to figure out this guy's deal, Maria," I murmured to the image. "Guide me in safeguarding our child." Facebook loaded sluggishly on my outdated machine. I'd located Jasper's page without trouble. Jasper Hale, finance expert at Morrison & Associates. His main photo had him propped against a scarlet Ferrari, shades mirroring the flash, his grin keen as a blade's tip. I browsed his updates, each one twisting my insides tighter. Finally snagged someone who gets the upscale life. Leveling up, shared 3 days prior with a snap of a lavish eatery receipt. The old crowd just can't grasp today's triumphs. Stuck in yesterday while we're forging tomorrow. From the previous week with heaps of likes from pals whose pages echoed similar vibes. In the replies to a buddy's update on a construction firm promotion, Jasper commented, "Nice, I suppose. Some folks settle for average existences. Not my style. Drive counts." My fists balled as I scanned further entries. Image after image of posh vehicles, luxury timepieces, upscale dining spots. But the wealth wasn't the issue. It was the mindset in every tagline, every remark. The disdain for those who labored manually, who crafted items, who aided others. A December entry drew my eye. Elevating my world one wise move at a time. Occasionally you must ditch the old to embrace the new. The responses brimmed with support from peers who mirrored his outlook. Someone inquired about his latest girlfriend, and Jasper answered, "She's ideal, innocent, gullible, and her dad's precisely the type of basic guy who won't stir trouble." Basic guy. The phrase struck like a gut punch. I reclined in my seat, the aged coils groaning beneath me. The tiny room felt even more confined. All around, family snapshots adorned the walls. Vivian's diploma ceremony, her initial flat. Celebrations where she extinguished candles as I rooted from afar. In each shot, it was solely us two. No broader kin, no backup beyond my own efforts. The service awards dangled in a plain frame by the shelves, but I seldom glanced at them these days. That chapter seemed remote, like another's tale. What counted was the oath to Maria on Vivian's birthday. I'd shield our girl from harm. I flipped through additional Jasper pics. Him at benefit galas, but always angled to flaunt his costly attire over the mission. Snaps from office gatherings where he stood a bit aloof from co-workers, his stance implying superiority. In one retreat image, he'd captioned, "Connecting with key players. It's not knowledge, it's contacts and leveraging them." Leveraging them! The wording chilled me. The residents hushed around me, easing into night with known groans and breaths. Through the slim partitions, I caught Mrs. Rodriguez's evening soap opera next door, the intense score wafting on the winter breeze. Everyday noises of an everyday area where folks watched over one another and held steady jobs. I recalled Vivian's expression that evening, how glowing she'd been, how fully she relied on this fellow. She'd taken after her mother's knack for spotting good in folks, for trusting love overcomes barriers. It was a trait I treasured in her, and now it frightened me. My image reflected in the shadowy pane, silvered locks, lined features, hands etched by years of genuine toil. All that Jasper appeared to scorn in my era, but these hands had comforted my daughter in tears, instructed her on biking, pulled overtime to fund her schooling. I shut the laptop and lingered in the gloom for a stretch. Come tomorrow evening, I'd face Jasper directly. I'd meet his gaze and judge if the person aligned with the haughty tone in those updates. I'd offer him an opportunity to disprove my doubts. But if he proved what those posts implied, if he viewed my daughter as another asset, another rung on his status climb, then I'd devise a means to guard her without shattering her belief in romance. Maria's photo seemed to affirm in the faint glow from the outside lamp. I brushed the ring under my shirt again, pulling resolve from the band that had seen years of commitment. Tomorrow I'd start uncovering what sort of man aimed to wed my daughter. I arose the following morning with Jasper's online rants still searing my thoughts. Rest had arrived in bits, broken by visions of Maria cautioning against those who treated affection like a deal. The winter dawn strained through my bedroom drapes, throwing faint rays over the space where I'd nurtured Vivian solo for 26 years. The phone buzzed as I smeared peanut butter on toast. My morning habit unaltered for ages. Vivian's tone sparkled through the line, still buoyed by betrothal bliss. Dad, morning. Sleep okay? I was up all night gazing at my ring. Morning, honey. I'm pleased you're joyful. I set the knife down, concentrating on a calm voice. About this evening, Jasper booked at the Golden Fork for 7:30. Know it? It's in Manhattan by Central Park. He calls it a city secret. I'd heard of it from paper critiques I'd never needed. The sort where starters exceeded my weekly food bill. Sounds posh, I noted, already questioning if my best suit would cut it. Oh, it is. Jasper has such sophisticated preferences. And Dad, his folks are still abroad in Europe. They won't return until near the wedding. But that's great since tonight's focused on you two connecting. 2 months overseas. The effortless opulence hinting at big funds. I pondered my own accrued leave, used on brief home repairs or history trips with Vivian. When do they depart? I queried. Post-Christmas, some lengthy art journey. Florence, Paris, Vienna. Jasper mentions they roam for months. Isn't that dreamy or handy? I mused, but held my tongue. Well, I'm eager to properly meet your beau, I stated. 7:30, right? Yes, and Dad, dress sharp, okay? Jasper prizes strong initial impressions. After the call ended, I lingered in my compact kitchen, surveying the abode I'd strive to uphold. The fridge bore Vivian's childhood drawings, college grad pics, tokens of a existence rooted in affection over affluence. The daylight exposed every frayed corner, every spot where I'd picked utility over style due to finances. I devoted the afternoon to prepping as if for a review. My single fine suit, deep blue, bought for Vivian's university commencement, dangled from the closet while I debated its suitability for the Golden Fork. The material was decent, but 5 years worn and bore my neat repair on a minor rip by the pocket. In the bathroom glass, I appraised my image harshly. 58, hair mostly gray, visage scarred by outdoor labor and lone parenting strains. My hands displayed marks from mechanical years, toughened skin telling of real work, not the polished paws of a spreadsheet juggler. I shaved meticulously with the electric unit Vivian gifted last holiday. She'd claimed it offered a pro vibe, and I'd taken it humorously, aware she fretted over me in role-reversed ways. The suit hung decently, though odd after months in labor gear and casuals. I'd stayed fit for my years, but the dressy attire highlighted how seldom I suited up lately. My social scene centered on block cookouts and Vivian's birthday meals, where ease trumped looks. While knotting my tie, I mulled the queries I aimed to pose without prying. How long had he known he wished to wed Vivian? What were his future goals? Did he grasp her essence? A woman prizing fidelity and compassion over riches. But beneath the courteous probes, grimmer ones loomed. Why the haste to wed? Why the timely parental absence? And crucially, did he cherish my daughter for herself or her role in his scheme? I caught myself strategizing like in my service days. Evaluate the landscape, spot risks, map varied paths to the goal. The goal tonight was straightforward. Grasp what manner of man sought my daughter's hand. The dresser photo captured Vivian at 10, toothless and beaming while displaying a fish from our upstate campout. She demanded to hook her bait solo, rejecting my aid. I handle stuff myself, Dad, she'd asserted with typical grit. That self-reliance aided her in studies and her design profession, but it exposed her to those who might confuse her gentleness for gullibility, her faith for frailty. I snatched my keys and billfold, verifying the texted location. The train to Manhattan would allow time to steady myself, to brace for whichever Jasper Hale emerged. The bold figure from Posts, or maybe a better one in flesh, deserving of my daughter's heart. Outside, the January bite nipped my cheeks as I secured the entry. Mrs. Rodriguez signaled from her pain, and I returned it, thankful for locals who'd guarded Vivian and me through time. Bonds wealth couldn't purchase. As I strode to the station, I saw I was treating this meal like past hazardous ops abroad, vigilant, ready, yet wishing for a positive result. Tonight, I'd discover if my daughter had picked a mate or a hunter. The cab rolled off from Fifth Avenue's edge, depositing me before the Golden Fork's grand front. Crystal lights shimmered through tall windows, and a doorman in pristine gloves motioned to the doorway with refined poise. I tweaked my tie once more, sensing the burden of every buck this venue demanded. Within, stone floors mirrored the gentle amber radiance. Patrons conversed in low murmurs, their outfits valued higher than my home loan installment. The hostess, a poised young lady with a grin that stayed surface level, scanned me top to bottom with subtle judgment. Reyes reservation, I stated, voice firm. She guided me past tables where gents sported watches gleaming like tiny stars. and ladies adorned with gems that twinkled per movement. I saw Vivian right away, her expression brightening as she flagged me from a nook seat. Next to her was Jasper, eyeing his device with the nonchalant disregard of one used to making others pause. Dad. Vivian rose on my approach, but Jasper stayed put until the final second, standing leisurely, as though the action burdened him. Mr. Reyes. His grip was slack, offhand, enduring just sufficiently to skirt rudeness. Vivian shared plenty about you. His delivery implied she'd overshared for his liking. Same here, I responded, easing into the seat opposite. Best wishes on the engagement. Jasper's grin was pure teeth, zero warmth. Thanks, we're thrilled for what's ahead. He beckoned the server with a commanding flick. We'll have the 2009 Bordeaux, full bottle. No discussion, no query on tastes. The server bowed respectfully and vanished. So, Mr. Reyes. Jasper reclined, fingertips tented like an interviewer. Vivian says you labor manually. That must be fulfilling. The hesitation before fulfilling spoke volumes. I'm a mechanic, I replied plainly. I mend what's damaged. How charmingly direct. His chuckle edged sharp. I'm in finance. Asset oversight, big risk ventures. A whole other realm, I'd guess. Vivian stretched over to clasp my hand. Dad reconstructed his bike from the ground up. It's gorgeous. A 70s classic Harley. Bikes. Jasper glanced at his Rolex showily. Risky pursuit at your stage, no? But eras vary on suitable dangers, I reckon. The wine came and Jasper enacted a fancy sampling ceremony as the expert hovered. He approved with a nod like granting a boon, then signaled for pours without checking if we desired it. Vivian's mentioned your charming Brooklyn area, he went on, twirling his goblet. So genuine, very blue-collar. I bet the neighborly vibe offsets other shortcomings. What shortcomings? The query escaped unbidden. Jasper's grin broadened. Oh, nothing particular. Just that after tasting elevated lifestyles, simpler joys lose appeal. But that's age-based, I believe. Your age prizes distinct elements, such as, I pressed. Conventional ideals, perhaps. Effort for effort's sake over clever work. Devotion to obsolete notions instead of evolving with times. He waved at the venue. Spots like this your age might deem wasteful luxury, while we view it as staking in meaningful moments. Vivian fidgeted. Jasper, Dad enjoys fine stuff too. Certainly, Jasper cut in slickly. No offense meant. Merely varied views on worth and accomplishment. He pivoted to me. Share, Mr. Reyes, what's your top accomplishment? The query was a snare artfully built. Boast and he'd belittle it. Modest and he'd see it as scant drive. Raising Vivian, I answered. Commendable, he inclined his head, eyes scheming. Solo parenting had to be tough. Scarce means, no doubt. Explains why Vivian values a provider for her path ahead. The barbs landed like strikes, each targeted. Vivian's cheeks burned. Jasper, come on, what? I'm just noting your dad's efforts. And with me here, those hardship times end. Vivian merits luxuries. Agree, Mr. Reyes? I clutched my napkin till joints paled. Nearby, glass tinkled on porcelain, a melody of riches and status that now choked. The server neared with menus, but Jasper dismissed him. We're set for the bill, actually. The server brought a hidebinder, setting it by Jasper's side with tactful care. Amid the glass and flame glow, I observed my daughter's betrothed inspect the tab with staged focus, brows arching in feigned shock. Well, well, he uttered, pushing the bill over the pale cloth to me with measured pace. Custom says the bride's dad covers the meal. The figure on the tab sank my stomach. $3.47 exceeding my monthly food costs. Jasper, no need. Vivian began, tone tight. Rubbish, dear. He brushed her aside, son's glance, gaze locked on mine like a stalker eyeing quarry. Your dad aims to back our union. Right, Mr. Reyes? The quiet dragged like a taut cable. Diners nearby chattered on, unaware of the creeping calamity at our spot. A lady nearby chuckled at her partner's quip, the noise lively and heedless in the golden ambiance. Naturally, Jasper pressed, settling back smugly. Your era likely misses current etiquette. In my group, this is standard. My hands shook, reaching for my wallet. The hide smoothed by years, a laborer's holder, never packing this eatery's expected sums. I sensed Vivian's stare, her features ashen in the flame light. Dad, let me... No, I laid my card on the tab, hoping it cleared. It's okay, princess. Jasper's grin beamed victorious. Splendid, I value a man grasping etiquette. He scanned his phone anew, flipping messages as if my embarrassment faded already. You know, Mr. Reyes, Vivian feared you might disapprove of us. I assured her grown-ups always bridge gaps. The term grown-up struck like a smack. The place buzzed with subtle opulence, the chime of costly utensils, the rustle of high-end cloths, the gentle mirth of those fitting here. I'd never felt more alien. I simply believe in treating people with respect, I said carefully. Respect? Jasper looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in apparent confusion. I thought I was being quite respectful. After all, I'm allowing you to maintain traditional customs. Some men in my position might insist on modern arrangements, but I understand the importance of letting older generations feel useful. Vivian's wineglass trembled in her hand. Jasper, please stop. Stop what, darling? I'm simply having a conversation with your father. His tone was innocent, but his eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Unless he's uncomfortable with honest discussion about our different backgrounds. The waiter returned with my credit card and a receipt. I signed it with a hand that shook slightly. The tip amount painful, but necessary to maintain dignity in front of the staff. $362 total, nearly a week's wages. There we are, Jasper said brightly as if he'd done me a favor. Nothing like a good meal to bring family together. Though I suppose this is quite a step up from your usual dining experiences, Mr. Reyes. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet that had fallen over our table. Vivian looked up at me with eyes that held growing horror and understanding. Thank you for dinner, Jasper continued, still seated, still smiling. I'm sure Vivian will appreciate seeing how well her two favorite men get along. The casual cruelty of it, the way he'd orchestrated my humiliation while positioning himself as gracious, took my breath away. This wasn't nervousness or social awkwardness. This was deliberate character assassination, performed with surgical precision in front of my daughter. Dad, Vivian whispered, standing as well. Her engagement ring caught the candlelight, throwing sparkles across the tablecloth like scattered stars. I looked down at Jasper, still lounging in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. His expensive suit, his perfect hair, his smug expression. Everything about him screamed privilege and entitlement. Vivian, I said quietly, I think we need to talk. I touched Vivian's elbow gently, guiding her away from the table toward a quieter alcove near their restaurant's entrance. Behind us, Jasper remained seated, already absorbed in his phone, as if the evening's events were simply another successful business transaction. The alcove was dimly lit, designed for intimate conversations and private moments. Through the amber glass, I could see the busy Manhattan street beyond. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small drama playing out behind crystal and marble. Dad, Vivian started, then stopped, her hands twisting together in her lap. Princess. I kept my voice gentle, though my chest still burned with suppressed anger. I need you to really think about how he treated both of us tonight. She stared at the table between us, her engagement ring catching the soft light. Maybe he was just nervous. First impressions are hard, and he knows how important you are to me. Was that nervousness? I asked quietly. The way he spoke about our neighborhood, the way he made me pay while acting like he was doing me a favor. Her face flushed, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. He's used to a different world, Dad. Different customs. Maybe it just seemed normal to him. Vivian, look at me. She raised her head reluctantly, and I saw me little girl again. The child who used to crawl into my lap when the world felt too big and confusing. A man who truly loves you would never deliberately humiliate your father, I said. He wouldn't mock the neighborhood where you grew up or dismiss the work that put food on your table. But I love him, she whispered, and the words sounded like a plea. And he says he loves me. I believe you love him. But honey, love isn't enough if it's not returned the same way. I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. I've seen his type before. They start with small disrespects and build from there. Tonight was a test to see how much I'd take, how much you'd excuse. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at our joined hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I saw how he looked at you. That wasn't nervousness, was it? No, sweetheart, it wasn't. He's never talked to me that way, she said quickly, as if defending him could make the evening's events disappear. He's always been sweet and attentive. I'm sure he has been. You're beautiful, successful, kind, everything a man like him wants to acquire. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. But acquisition isn't love, Vivian. Love means cherishing what someone values, not dismissing it. Tears gathered in her eyes. What if you're right? What if I've made a terrible mistake? The question broke my heart. I thought of all the times I'd watched her struggle with decisions, wanting to shelter her from every disappointment but knowing she needed to learn to trust her own judgment. Then you figure out what to do next, I said simply. And you remember that whatever happens, you're not alone. You have people who love you for exactly who you are. People who would never ask you to be ashamed of where you come from. She wiped her eyes with the cloth napkin, leaving small dark spots on the expensive fabric. I thought I was so smart, so independent. How did I not see this? Because you have a good heart, and you believe the best in people. Don't ever let anyone make you think that's a weakness. I squeezed her hands. You deserve someone who honors what you value, not someone who sees your love Asa step up his social ladder. Through the alcove's glass partition I could see Jasper still at our table, now speaking animatedly on his phone. His body language was relaxed, confident, a man who believed he'd won an important victory. I keep thinking about the way he talked about our neighborhood, Vivian said slowly, like it was something embarrassing instead of home. Your mother and I chose that neighborhood because it was full of good people who looked out for each other. You grew up surrounded by teachers and firefighters and shop owners who knew your name and watched you grow up. That's not something to be ashamed of. I know, she said, but her voice was uncertain. Do you? Because the way he talked tonight, you'd think honest work was something to be hidden. Like the hands that built your treehouse and taught you to change a tire were somehow shameful. She looked back toward Jasper, who had finished his call and was now checking his watch with obvious impatience. He's probably wondering what's taking so long. Let him wonder. I kept my voice steady, though part of me wanted to march back to that table and explain a few things about respect. This conversation is about you, not him. What should I do, Dad? The question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. I thought of Maria, of the advice she would have given our daughter in this moment. Only you can decide that, Princess. But whatever you choose, I'll be here. And if you ever need a safe place to land, our door's always open. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know. She stood up slowly, straightening her dress and composing herself. I should go back. He'll want to leave soon. I stood as well, fighting the urge to pull her into my arms and carry her home like I had when she was small, and the world had hurt her feelings. Just remember what we talked about, okay? And trust your instincts. They're better than you think. We walked back toward the main dining room together, her hand resting lightly on my arm. The taxi pulled away from the Golden Fork as Manhattan's glittering facade began to fade behind us. I slumped against the worn vinyl seat, feeling every one of my 58 years settling into my bones like winter cold. The driver's radio played soft jazz, a stark contrast to the symphony of car horns and sirens that form the city's eternal soundtrack. Through the fogged window, I watched the transformation unfold, towering glass monuments giving way to older brick buildings, designer storefronts replaced by corner bodegas and laundromats. The people on the sidewalks changed too, from power suits and designer heels to work clothes and practical shoes. My world, the world Jasper had spent the evening mocking. My hand found the gold chain beneath my shirt, fingers closing around the warm metal of Maria's wedding ring. 28 years since I'd slipped it onto her finger, 18 since I'd taken it off for the last time. The promise I'd made at her bedside echoed in the taxi's quiet space. Take care of our girl, Gus. Keep her safe from anyone who'd hurt her. I thought I understood what that meant then. Scraped knees and teenage heartbreak. Maybe some college boy who didn't appreciate her worth. I never imagined someone like Jasper who could slice her self-worth into ribbons while smiling and calling it love. The Brooklyn Bridge stretched ahead, its cables catching the reflection of streetlights like a web of silver threads. Below, the East River flowed dark and endless toward the harbor, where I'd first set foot in New York 40 years ago. Fresh out of the service with nothing but hope and determination. What would you do, sweetheart? I whispered to the window, watching Maria's face form in the condensation. How do I protect her without losing her? But I knew what she'd say. Maria had never tolerated bullies, whether they wore expensive suits or torn jeans. When Vivian was 8 and Tommy Morrison kept pulling her braids at school, Maria had marched down to that playground and given Tommy a lecture about respect that left him wide-eyed and apologetic. Not through threats or intimidation, but through the simple, devastating power of moral authority. The taxi turned off the bridge into familiar territory. Brownstone apartments with fire escapes zigzagging down their faces. Small front yards where people grew tomatoes and roses in equal measure. Mrs. Rodriguez's window glowed warm yellow, her evening tele providing soundtrack to the neighborhood's settling rhythm. I thought about Vivian's face in that quiet alcove, the way her certainty had cracked when I'd asked her to really look at Jasper's behavior. She was starting to see it, the condescension disguised as charm, the control masquerading as care. But seeing and accepting were different things, especially when your heart was invested in a different story. My chest tightened as I replayed the evening's humiliations. The way Jasper had dismissed our neighborhood as quaint, as if the place where I'd raised my daughter was some kind of museum exhibit. The calculated cruelty of sliding that check across the table, knowing exactly what it would cost me, knowing I'd pay it anyway for Vivian's sake. But it was more than money. It was the message behind it. That I was old, weak, irrelevant, that my values were outdated, my work meaningless, my love for my daughter nothing more than an obstacle to be circumvented. "You're wrong about that, boy," I said to the passing streetlights. Dead wrong. The taxi slowed, turning onto my street where the trees were just beginning to show the first hints of spring buds. Porch lights created pools of welcome warmth, and I could see Mr. Fox across the street putting out his garbage for tomorrow's collection. Normal people living normal lives, building something solid with their hands and hearts. I'd spent 30 years in this neighborhood watching children grow up and move away, helping neighbors through divorces and job losses and family celebrations. These were the people Jasper saw as beneath him, teachers and mechanics and shop owners who measured their worth in relationships rather than bank accounts. The wedding ring pressed against my chest as the taxi pulled up to my house. Through the front window I could see the living room, where I'd taught Vivian to tie her shoes, where we'd watch Saturday morning cartoons and built blanket forts that covered half the furniture, where Maria and I had planned our future, and where I'd raised our daughter alone when that future was cut short. "I promised you I'd keep her safe," I said to the empty seat beside me. "That boy is dangerous, Maria. Not with fists or weapons, but with something worse. He wants to own her, not love her." Thermometer clicked off and I handed the driver cash with a tip that would help him get home to his own family. As He pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk looking up at the house that had sheltered 3 generations of honest living. Tomorrow I would call Vivian. We'd talk, really talk, about what she'd seen tonight and what it meant for her future. I wouldn't try to control her choice, but I'd make sure she understood what choice she was making. And if Jasper decided to escalate this war, he'd start it. Well, he'd learned that underestimating a man based on his work clothes was a mistake that carried consequences. I climbed the front steps slowly, key turning in the lock of the door that had always been open to anyone who needed shelter or wisdom, or just a hot meal, and someone to listen. Inside the house waited quietly, filled with memories and the promise of whatever came next. 6 weeks had passed since that disastrous dinner. 6 weeks of tense phone calls and careful conversations. Vivian had been asking questions about respect, about relationships, about the difference between love and possession. Each conversation made Jasper more agitated, more desperate to regain control. The sound of an expensive engine cut through the quiet Brooklyn evening, followed by a car door slamming with unnecessary force. Through my front window, I watched Jasper stride up the walkway, his expensive coat whipping behind him like a battle flag. He didn't knock, he pounded. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch, his usual polished veneer cracked and ugly. Without invitation, he pushed past me into the living room, his eyes taking in the modest furniture and family photos with unconcealed disdain. "We need to talk," he said, spinning to face me. "Now." I closed the door deliberately, keeping it unlocked. "About what? Don't play dumb with me." His voice was sharp, aggressive. "Vivian's been different since that dinner. She's asking questions, having doubts. I know you've been poisoning her mind against me. Have I?" I kept my tone level, watching him pace like a caged animal in my living room. "What exactly do you think I told her?" "You told her I was disrespectful, that I don't value family." He stopped pacing, his hands clenched at his sides. "You made her question everything about our relationship." I told her what I observed. "Nothing more, nothing less." His laugh was harsh, brittle. "Right. The concerned father act. Very touching." He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate. "But here's what you're going to do. You're going to call her tomorrow and apologize. Tell her you were wrong about me. That you overreacted, or what?" The question hung in the air between us. Jasper's face flushed red, and for a moment the mask slipped completely away. "Or you'll find out what it's like to lose access to your daughter permanently." I studied his face, the entitled rage, the desperation beneath the bluster. This was a man who'd never been told no, never faced real resistance. In his world, money and status solved every problem, bought every compliance. "Young man," I said quietly, "I think you're forgetting yourself." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, waving it like a weapon. "One call to Vivian right now. I tell her you threaten me, that you're trying to break us up out of jealousy. Who do you think she'll believe? Her loving fiancé or her bitter, lonely father? Is that really how you want to play this?" Something in my tone made him hesitate. For the first time since he'd barged through my door, uncertainty flickered across his face. He stood perfectly still, hands relaxed at my sides, but something about my posture made him take a half step back. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I've worked too hard to get where I am. I won't let some old mechanic ruin everything I've built." "And what exactly have you built?" "Success, money, a future." He gestured wildly around my modest living room. "Things you wouldn't understand. Real achievement. Not just this." "This," I said, indicating the photos of Vivian's childhood on the mantelpiece, "is a daughter who knows she's loved unconditionally. This is 26 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and homework help. This is what actual achievement looks like. Sentimental garbage." But his voice had lost some of its edge. "The world doesn't run on bedtime stories, old man. It runs on power and money and knowing how to use both. Maybe your world does." I moved slightly, not threatening, but positioning myself between him and the deeper parts of my house. "But Vivian comes from a different world, one where character matters more than bank accounts." He was sweating now. Despite the cool evening, his expensive shirt starting to stick to his skin. "She'll choose me. When it comes down to it, she'll choose the life I can give her over whatever this represents." "Will she?" I asked mildly. "Because from what I've seen lately, she's starting to understand the difference between being provided for and being valued." For a moment I thought he might actually swing at me, his whole body tensed, hands curling into fists. But something, maybe the way I stood perfectly calm, maybe some instinct that warned him he was out of his depth, made him check himself. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Vivian's mine. She chose me, not this, not you. Vivian's not property, son. She doesn't belong to anyone." He headed for the door, then turned back one more time. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," I said quietly, "I think I have a pretty good idea." After he left, I stood in my living room listening to his car roar away into the night. Through the walls, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television, the Johnsons' dog barking at something in their yard, normal sounds from normal people living normal lives. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. I picked up the phone to call Vivian, then set it down again. This conversation needed to happen face to face. The next afternoon, I stood outside Vivian's Manhattan apartment building, a small bouquet of daisies, her mother's favorite flowers, clutched in my weathered hands. The doorman recognized me from previous visits, nodding respectfully as he announced my arrival. "Send him up," came Vivian's voice through the intercom, warm but cautious. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me time to organize my thoughts. How do you tell your daughter that her fiancé came to your house making threats? How do you balance honesty with the need to let her make her own choices? She opened the door before I could knock, and I was struck by how tired she looked. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usual bright smile seemed forced. "Dad," she stepped aside to let me enter. "What brings you here?" "These are for you?" I offered the daisies, watching her face soften as she recognized the significance. And I wanted to talk. Her apartment was beautiful, all clean lines and carefully chosen colors that reflected her design talent. But I noticed how sterile it felt compared to our family home, how the expensive furniture created distance rather than intimacy. "Let me put these in water," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. "Coffee? That would be nice, princess." When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, we settled on her modern sofa. Beautiful, but not particularly comfortable. She tucked her legs beneath her like she used to as a child. And for a moment I saw my little girl again. "I want you to know," I began carefully, "that whatever happens between you and Jasper, I love you completely. Your happiness is the most important thing to me." She nodded, but her eyes were wary. But I also need you to know that Jasper came to see me last night." Her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. "He what?" "He was angry. Said you'd been asking questions, having doubts. He wanted me to call you and apologize, tell you I was wrong about him." I kept my voice steady, factual. "When I refused, he made some threats about cutting off my access to you." Vivian set down her mug with shaking hands. "I can't believe I knew he was upset about things, but to go to your house. How did he act when he came home last night?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee, agitated, angry. Hess said he'd had a difficult day at work, but now that I think about it, she looked up at me with growing horror. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never thought he would. You have nothing to apologize for. I leaned forward, covering her hands with mine. But I am worried about you. The way he spoke about you last night. Like you were something he owned rather than someone he loved. Tears gathered in her eyes. I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant. About respect and how people treat what you value. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. He's never talked about our neighborhood the way he did that night. Never made me feel ashamed of where I came from. And how do you feel about that? Confused, hurt. She pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. I love him, Dad, I really do. But the man I fell in love with wouldn't threaten my father, wouldn't try to cut me off from my family. People don't usually start with the big controlling behaviors, I said gently. They start small, criticizing your friends, making you feel guilty for spending time with family, making you question your own judgment. She was nodding, tears flowing freely now. He's been doing that. Little comments about my choices, about how I should dress for his work functions, about how my friends aren't sophisticated enough. She looked at me with dawning realization. How did I not see it? Because you loved him. Because you wanted to believe the best. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around her like I had when she was small and the world felt too big and confusing. That's not a weakness, sweetheart. That's who you are. Someone who believes in people, who sees their potential. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm throwing away something good because I'm scared? I thought about Maria, about the promise I'd made to protect our daughter from anyone who would hurt her. But protection sometimes meant stepping back, letting her find her own strength. Only you can answer that, I said. But I can tell you this. A man who truly loves you would never try to separate you from the people who matter to you. Love doesn't make demands like that. She cried quietly against my shoulder while afternoon light streamed through her windows, illuminating the expensive furniture and designer accessories that suddenly seemed less important than the simple act of a father comforting his daughter. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You don't have to decide everything today, but remember, whatever you choose, I'll be here. Our door is always open and our love for you never changes. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red but clearer than they'd been in weeks. I love you too, Dad, so much. I know, Princess, I know. We sat together as the afternoon light faded. Father and daughter rebuilt on the foundation of honesty and unconditional love. Whatever came next, we would face it together. April sunshine filtered through the flowering trees of eternal gardens, casting dappled shadows across white chairs arranged in perfect rows. I stood at the edge of the reception area tugging at my jacket, the same navy suit from Vivian's college graduation, now feeling inadequate among the sea of designer formal wear. Guests mingled in clusters, champagne glasses catching the afternoon light-scattered diamonds. I recognized none of them beyond a few of Vivian's college friends who offered polite waves from across the lawn. Everyone else belonged to Jasper's world. Sleek haircuts, expensive watches, conversations about stock portfolios and European vacations. The ceremony had been beautiful. Vivian glowed in her mother's altered wedding dress. The lace Maria had chosen 40 years ago transformed into something that honored both past and present. When the minister asked who gave this woman, I'd stood with pride despite the knot in my stomach, knowing what reception likely held in store. Excuse me, sir. A young man with a camera approached. Could you step aside? We're trying to get family photos. I moved back, watching Jasper pose with his groomsmen, his smile razor sharp as he spotted me retreating. This was his domain now, his rules. Every gesture reminded me that I was here on sufferance, a necessary inconvenience to be managed and minimized. Dad. Vivian appeared at my elbow, radiant despite the tension I could see in her eyes. Come meet Jasper's college friends. But as we approached the group, Jasper materialized with practiced smoothness. Sweetheart, the photographer needs you for a few more shots. Your father can introduce himself. She hesitated, glancing between us. But I wanted. Trust me, we'll have plenty of time for mixing later. His hand on her waist was possessive, steering her away before she could protest further. Left alone among strangers, I wandered toward the reception tables, reading place cards until I found my name. Table 12, far from the wedding party, sandwiched between Vivian's elderly great-aunt and a couple I didn't recognize. The message was clear. Family, but barely. You must be Vivian's father. A woman in pearls extended her manicured hand. I'm Caroline, Jasper's colleague. He's told us so much about you. The way she said it suggested the stories hadn't been flattering. All good things, I hope. I kept my voice neutral. Her laugh was like wind chimes in a storm. Oh, you know how Jasper is so clever with his observations about people. Around us, the reception began to flow like choreographed theater. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays. Wine glasses refilled before they emptied. Conversations humming with Thea's confidence of money talking to money. I found my assigned seat and greeted my table mates, Aunt Ruth, who squeezed my hand with genuine warmth, and the Hendersons, nice people who'd known Vivian since childhood. For a moment, surrounded by actual family and friends, I allowed myself to relax. That's when I saw Jasper approaching, his predator's smile firmly in place. Mr. Reyes, how are you finding everything up to your standards? The question carried barbs wrapped in silk around the table. Conversation quieted as people sensed the undercurrent. Everything's beautiful, I replied carefully. You and Vivian have done a wonderful job. Well, Vivian had very specific ideas about elegance. I think we've achieved something quite sophisticated. He paused, letting his eyes sweep the lavish surroundings. Though I suppose this is all quite different from what you're used to. Aunt Ruth's fingers tightened on her napkin. The Hendersons exchanged uncomfortable glances. Different can be good, I said. Oh, absolutely. Variety is the spice of life. Jasper moved behind my chair as it prepared to sit down for the dinner service. I was just telling some colleagues earlier about the diverse backgrounds represented here today. Really fascinating sociology. I began to lower myself into the chair, one hand on each armrest when I felt the sharp pull. The chair jerked backward just as my weight committed to sitting, sending me crashing ungracefully to the polished floor. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs. My jacket tore at the shoulder seam around me. Conversation died as heads turned toward the sound. Oops, Jasper said, his voice carrying clearly across the sudden quiet. Looks like someone's getting a bit unsteady on their feet. Age catches up to all of us eventually. But his eyes blazed with triumph, and in that moment his mask slipped completely. Maybe you'd be more comfortable closer to ground level anyway. Your place is on the floor. Gasps rippled through nearby tables. Aunt Ruth half rose from her seat, horror written across her weathered features. The Hendersons stared in shock at behavior that violated every principle of basic decency. From across the reception area, I heard Vivian's cry of distress as she spotted me on the ground. Her ballet falling forgotten, as she rushed toward the scene. I lay there for a heartbeat, feeling every one of my 58 years surrounded by the silence of 100 people who just witnessed deliberate cruelty disguised as accident. Through the flowering trees, spring sunshine continued to dapple the reception tables with cheerful light, indifferent to the ugly moment playing out beneath. Behind me, I heard the rustle of expensive fabric and caught a familiar voice saying, "Nancy, hurry, we're already so late." The late arrivals entered through the garden's main archway, a distinguished couple still showing signs of hasty travel. The man moved with unmistakable military bearing despite his civilian clothes, scanning the reception with practiced eyes that took in everything, the uncomfortable silence, the scattered guests, and the man being helped from the ground. "So there you are." A woman near the entrance waved relief. We were so worried about the flight delay, but Sol Hale had stopped moving entirely, his attention locked on the figure, struggling to stand with his daughter's assistance. Something about the way the older man held his shoulders even in distress triggered a memory buried deep in combat-trained reflexes. "It can't be," he whispered, leaving his wife Nancy's side without explanation. I was dusting off my torn jacket when I heard boots crossing the reception area with purpose. Military boots, though the man wore dress shoes, the sound of someone who'd spent decades learning to move with authority and intention. "Sir," the voice cut through the murmur of uncomfortable guests. "Sir, is that really you?" I looked up from straightening my tie to find a face I hadn't seen in 20 years, aged but unmistakable. Gray now touched his temples. Lines marked his features. But the eyes held the same steady intelligence. I remembered from desert bivouacs and midnight. Patrols. Sol. The name escaped before I could stop. It's Soldier Hale, his face, transformed with recognition and something deeper, the bone-deep gratitude of a man whose life had been saved and never forgotten. "Sergeant Reyes, I can't believe. What are you doing here?" Around us, guests leaned closer, sensing drama but not understanding its source. Jasper stood frozen, his triumph curdling into confusion as his father approached the man he just humiliated. "This is my daughter's wedding," I said quietly, glancing toward Vivian, who watched our reunion with growing amazement. Sol's eyes widened as the impossible coincidence registered. His gaze swung to Jasper, then back to me, processing implications that would reshape everything he thought he knew about this day. "Your daughter," he began, then stopped as understanding hit him like artillery fire. His voice rose, carrying across the reception with the projection of a man trained to address troops in combat zones. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to understand something." The authority in his tone commanded immediate attention. Conversation ceased. Waiters paused mid-service. Even the string quartet lowered their instruments. "This man," Sol continued, his hand falling on my shoulder with reverence, "is Sergeant Gus Reyes, United States Army. In April 2003, Forward Operating Base Charlie in Iraq, insurgents overran our position during a night patrol." Nancy appeared at his side, recognizing the story she'd heard countless times but never expecting to meet its hero. Her eyes filled with understanding as she looked between her husband and the man who'd saved him. "I was wounded, trapped under enemy fire." Sol's voice carried emotion that 20 years hadn't diminished. "This man, this hero, risked his life to pull me to safety. He carried me 300 YD through active gunfire to the evacuation point." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward me with new awareness, recontextualizing everything they'd witnessed. The man on the ground wasn't some working-class embarrassment. He was a decorated veteran who'd earned his honor in blood and courage. "I recommended him for the Silver Star," Sol continued, his voice thick with pride and emotion. "For valor under fire, for saving the life of a fellow soldier when any reasonable person would have sought cover." Jasper's face had gone white as desert sand. His mouth worked soundlessly as the magnitude of his miscalculation became clear. The simple mechanic he'd been tormenting was a war hero decorated for the kind of courage Jasper couldn't imagine possessing. "I never told me," Vivian whispered, but her voice carried in the stunned silence. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at me with new eyes. "Dad, you never said anything about 'I just did my job, Sue.'" I interrupted, uncomfortable with the attention. "Any soldier would have done the same thing." "No, sir, not any soldier." Sol's voice cracked with emotion. "You saved my life so I could come home to Nancy, so I could see my son grow up, so I could walk him down this very aisle today." He turned toward Jasper, whose face now showed horror at the recognition of what he'd done. "This man is the reason I have a family," Sol declared to the silent crowd. "He's a genuine American hero, and if I just witnessed someone treating him with anything less than complete respect." His eyes found Jasper's, carrying a father's disappointment that cut deeper than any shouting could. The reception area buzzed with whispered conversations as guests processed the revelation. Wine glasses sat forgotten on tables as people stared at the torn-jacketed man who'd carried their host's father to safety under enemy fire. From her position beside me, Vivian reached for my hand, squeezing it with fierce pride and love. "Welcome home, Sergeant," Sol said formally, snapping to attention in his dress clothes. A soldier honoring his commander one final time. The silence stretched like held breath until Jasper stepped forward, his face ashen but resolute. The confident predator who'd orchestrated my humiliation had vanished, replaced by a young man confronting the wreckage of his own character. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, moving toward the microphone the band had been using for announcements. "I need to address everyone here." Guests shifted uncomfortably as he adjusted the microphone with trembling hands. Vivian moved closer to me, her grip on my arm tight with apprehension. "What happened here tonight, what I did, was inexcusable." His words carried across the reception area, amplified for everyone to hear. "I've spent months treating this man with disrespect and contempt, and I just learned why that makes me not just wrong, but despicable." Nancy Hale pressed her hands to her mouth, recognizing her son's anguish. Sol stood rigid, waiting to see if the boy he'd raised could find the courage to make things right. "My father just told you that Sergeant Reyes saved his life in Iraq." Jasper's voice gained strength as he forced himself to continue. "What he didn't tell you is that for the past few months I've been treating this war hero like he was beneath me. Because he's a mechanic. Because he lives in Brooklyn instead of Manhattan. Because I was too insecure and stupid to see past my own prejudices." A woman at table 6 whispered something to her companion. I caught fragments, pulled the chair, deliberately humiliated. I made fun of his neighborhood, his work, his values. I forced him to pay for an expensive dinner just to watch him struggle with the bill. Jasper's confession grew more painful with each admission. Tonight I pulled his chair away and watched him fall, then told him his place was on the floor. Gasps echoed across the reception. Several guests looked toward him with expressions ranging from sympathy to outrage. The photographer, still holding his camera, seemed unsure whether to document this unprecedented breakdown of wedding protocol. "And why did I do all this?" Jasper continued, his voice raw with self-remation. "Because I was afraid I'd never measure up to my father's service. Afraid that Vivian would see I'm not half the man either of them is. So I tried to tear down someone who deserved only honor and respect." He turned directly toward me, abandoning the microphone to speak from his heart. "Mr. Reyes, Sergeant Reyes, I am profoundly sorry. You saved my father's life, and I repaid that debt by trying to humiliate you in front of your daughter. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm asking for the chance to earn it." The reception area had gone completely still. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, transfixed by the public dismantling of a man's pride in service of his conscience. "I want to learn from your example," he continued, his voice breaking. "I want to become the kind of man who deserves to be part of your family, the kind of man who protects and honors what matters instead of attacking it out of fear." Tears streamed down Vivian's face as she watched her new husband strip away every pretense, every defense, laying his flaws bare before God and everyone. Nancy had moved to Saul's side, both parents watching their son with a mixture of heartbreak and hope. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of Maria's ring against my chest and the promise I'd made to protect our daughter. But protection sometimes meant teaching others how to love her properly. "Son," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence, "it takes more courage to admit mistakes publicly than it does to make them privately. What matters now isn't what you did, it's what you choose to do going forward." Relief flooded his features as I extended my hand, then pulled him into the embrace his apology had earned. Family means supporting each other through everything, the good times and the times when we fall short of who we want to be. "Welcome to our family," I said quietly for his ears alone. "And thank you for loving my daughter enough to become worthy of her." Saul approached with military precision, but his eyes held the warmth of a father whose son had finally learned the lessons that mattered most. "I'm proud of you, Jasper." This is theme and I raised, the one I knew was in there. Nancy joined our circle, tears flowing freely as she embraced both Vivian and me. "I'm so sorry for what you endured, but I'm grateful my son found the strength to make it right." The photographer raised his camera hesitantly. "Should I?" "Yes," Vivian said firmly, her arm around my waist and her hand finding Jasper's document this. The moment our family really began, as applause began slowly and built to a crescendo. I felt Maria's presence as surely as if she stood beside me. Our daughter had chosen well, not the man Jasper had been, but the man he was becoming. The band resumed playing. Couples moved toward the dance floor, and somewhere in the garden's flowering trees, spring sang its eternal song of growth and second chances. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.